Welcome to the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast. This podcast is for you if you lead people, teams, or the organisation. You might be a leader or a manager yourself, or you might be part of the support team to help those people to be really successful. I'm Anwen Bottois. I'm the leadership success coach and founder of Purple Sky Consulting, and I'm going to be the host for this podcast. My mission is to help as many leaders as possible to really love what they do. I want to help you to feel more confident, more capable, more effective, so that you can build and grow happy, healthy, more successful teams. This podcast is going to be all about helping you to love leading. Let's get started. Welcome to this episode of the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast. Today, I'm really delighted to be joined by Lisa Thompson of Iona HR. We are going to be talking about how to get on top of those little annoying issues that might be bubbling up. And how do we try and avoid them escalating? How do we avoid them becoming a problem? So if you're a leader yourself, there'll be lots of hints and tips in here about how you can take action on stuff really quickly and really early. And how you can kind of look after yourself in that process as well. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get started. Hi, Lisa. Welcome to this episode of the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast. Really happy to have you here.
I've been really looking forward to it. It's great to be here.
So, as we normally do, let's start by you giving us a little bit of an introduction about who you are, what you do, and why it is you do those things.
Yeah, sure. So I think I should start with the fact that I've been working in HR for all of my working life, which is about 27 years now. So it was something I fell into. I don't really think it was a conscious choice to work in HR back in those days. It wasn't even a career option, really. And after uni, I ended up in an HR department in an admin role. I thought, well, I like this. And luckily they thought, oh, she's quite good at that. And I worked my way up, did my CIPD, and then moved on, got promoted, and you know how it goes. And all of a sudden it's 27 years later and it's my career. So I've worked across most sectors and worked my way up, and I was HRD at one point, and then I just decided that I wanted to do my own thing. I tend to do what I do because I've witnessed some shocking leadership practices in my time. I've actually been subjected to some shocking and toxic leadership practices too, as well as having the pleasure to work with some people who were wonderful leaders and who I learned a lot from. And I kind of wanted to be part of a solution in this. I wanted to be able to offer services, to support leaders and managers to get it right from the start, as well as providing support for organisations around their trickier ER issues and employee relations, casework, stupid transfers, things like that. I work with purpose-led, socially focused organisations around their outsourced HR requirements, as well as cheapy transfers, project work, big ER cases, things like that. I'd love to get these organisations to a point where the culture is just spot on, that people have got a workplace where they feel valued, empowered, managers feel valued and empowered and have the skills in order to, support their teams. That's my goal and my aim. That's where I want to get to. If I can maybe just help one manager to not wing it in a disciplinary hearing, then, my job's done for that week.
So I love that. I love your energy and interest in that operational side of HR as well. I know you look at the broader stuff too, but that's where we've kind of connected, because that's the stuff I don't particularly enjoy quite so much. So we like that crossover of where your interests are and maybe where mine aren't. So that's always good to bring on people that are going to be able to help in that space.
Yeah.
First of all, we like to get into a bit of travel advice, ideas or suggestions. So where have you loved going on a holiday or travelling to?
So travel's huge for me. It's one of my reasons for working, to be perfectly honest. we've discovered in the last few years, cruises, and they're a game changer. I've done one kind of land-based holiday since then, and I've got to say by like day 3 I was like, what do we do now? We're in the same place with the same people. But yeah, so going forward for us, it's definitely cruises. I just love being able to wake up somewhere different every day, and I've got to say, we've been lucky to be on some amazing cruise lines and ships, and the service is amazing, the food's amazing, everything's just lovely and so easy when you're on there, and then you just get to see all of these different places. But I guess if I was nailed down to one destination, we were really lucky earlier this year to do a cruise in South America, which ended in Rio, and that was just an assault on the senses. It was incredible. Copacabana Beach is wild. You can buy anything that you want on that beach. I'm not joking. I just sat all day in awe and watching everything that was going on around us, from these amazing, huge Brazilian families who all pitched up on the beach together and, had their lunch in Tupperwares, and they were there all day, and it was a big family occasion, to people playing football on the beach. And oh my goodness, the skills, seriously, like for small children, like the skills were incredible. But then there was just all of these beach sellers coming around with anything. I kid you not, I'm pretty sure there was fitted kitchens that you could have bought on that beach. It was the most
Having a bit excess carry on for back home.
Yeah, I would have struggled getting that back with us. But yeah, Rio, Copacabana Beach, all of the things that Rio has to offer was incredible. Highly recommend if anyone gets the opportunity to do it. It's a once in a lifetime type of destination.
We've not done any South America yet, and that is really high on our list of places to get to. So yeah, I will keep an eye out for making that higher up on our list of destinations. So we're going to be talking about how leaders can kind of maybe get ahead of problems escalating in a minute, and we're going to talk about ideas and tips and tricks on that. Before we get into that, you touched on some of your leadership experience. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about your leadership experience, and what did you learn about yourself from that leadership experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I've had the privilege of leading small teams right up to 60 people on one site, or teams which are split across the UK, and which brings its own set of challenges, and they're each different situations. I think for me, what the big thing I learned is that leadership and your leadership style is a choice, and not many people recognize that, at least not at the outset, and they can decide what sort of a leader they want to be, and it's upon that person to become that type of leader that they would want for themselves, what they should aspire to. I mean, none of us are perfect, and I think as long as we're really trying to keep improving in this area, then that's all we can ask. Hand on heart, I've tried to learn from every single mistake that I actually had to suffer through. That's always the voice in the back of my head saying, you shouldn't really approach it in that way because that happened and you didn't like it. That didn't feel good. So let's try something else. And I think if we can learn from that, because we've all had those horrible situations that we've either seen or we've witnessed ourselves, suffered through ourselves. And I guess the other key thing is that it's realizing, and I didn't realize this at the beginning, but we don't have to have all of the answers. That's not what being a leader is. And I think that we think that initially, that we should know everything. Actually, there's so much power in asking the questions and listening and involving the team. So it's that vulnerability then, I think, maybe allowing yourself to be the person who says, okay, I'm not sure how we do this, but we can figure this out together. So what's everyone's ideas? What do we think? And then, as a leader, you're the person that's responsible then for setting the strategy for how you decide to do it. But just coming at it from that different angle, I think really helps in so many ways. You're human to your team, and also you're giving them the opportunity to be involved and to be part of the solution, which is obviously textbook perfect, ideal thing to do. So yeah, I think they would be my key takeaways.
Love that. Love that. And I think that element of choice and making decisions and being active in your leadership like ties in really nicely to our topic today. So we're going to talk about ideas, thoughts, hints and tips around how as a leader you can really kind of step in to deal with things early on so that we stop them escalating, we stop them actually becoming a problem, we try and deal with something quite early. So maybe you could just share with us your perspective on why do you think it's important for leaders, line managers to kind of nip stuff in the bud early, to kind of get involved where they're noticing something might be problematic? What's your thoughts on that?
It's just the principles of basic justice, isn't it? If someone doesn't know that they're doing something wrong, how can we expect them to stop doing it or to do it in a different way? And a lot of the time it is these small things. It's not that someone knows that they're misbehaving or is deliberately doing something the wrong way. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I've seen it, it does. And, there's a different strategy for that situation. But I'd say about 95% of the time, people don't come to work to do a bad job. They come to work to do a decent job, to be happy, to feel valued, to get paid so that they can have a nice life. That's pretty much what our society is built on. And so I think we just have such a duty. If somebody is doing something that's not the way that the manager expects it, or, it falls below the standards, or it's not what their operating procedure is in that area, just tell them. It's not difficult. Just have that conversation. And then at least someone has the chance to put it right before they've been doing it for 6 months, because that's where we end up. So yeah, I think people aren't mind readers. We haven't, an AI can't do that for us yet. It's just basic common sense, isn't it? Give people a fighting chance to get it right.
Do you, whether it's reflecting on your experiences, thinking about your work with your clients, what are you seeing the results or the impacts of maybe not getting on top of stuff early?
So I've got quite a lengthy career in dealing with really complex and nasty grievance investigations and hearings. And I would say about 80% of those could have been avoided by somebody having a conversation or being really clear at the outset about something. That this early intervention is so important. It really could prevent so many situations which then become formal or results in someone going off sick with stress or anxiety, or the team losing respect, because that's unfortunately what happens. So these situations will only get worse if you don't address it, if you don't pick up and just have that chat. Then the person's going to continue doing it. The team's going to be watching. They're going to see that something's not being done that's right, or the way that it should be. And they'll see that nothing's changing, so they'll assume it hasn't been picked up. And they'd be right in most cases. So they'll start to lose respect for the manager. They'll get really annoyed with the team member for not putting their weight in the right way. So you'll end up with conflict situations that kind of within the team. You'll end up with lack of respect from the team for the manager. The person's still doing that thing wrong. And the other thing that can happen is that sometimes I think with less experienced managers, they then build it up into like something that's bigger than it needs to be, because they've bitten their tongue for whatever reason for so long. And they might be getting a bit of pressure from their manager about it. They may not like the idea of just having that adult, sensible conversation. That might be quite difficult for them. So they build it up in their head to something far bigger than it actually is. And then what I've seen happen is they go in at it like a bull in a china shop, and it just explodes. And you know what? It didn't need to happen. It all could have been stopped at the very beginning by the manager saying, can we just have a little chat about this? This is the way that we do things around here. You know. So I think that this is a real soapbox issue for me, because I just think it's something I'm really passionate about, because we could do it so much better, and it could resolve so many of these situations, and we just don't. By having a happy, productive team who understand what's expected of them, they understand how to do their jobs, they've got support, they've got appropriate levels of challenge in order to progress. You know, it's all of those good added value things that's where it really comes in, and then that hits your bottom line and it drives it up. And if you get all of that right, then you're doing your job. That's what a manager's job is.
Absolutely. I think it's such a really valid point around how do we really help you as leaders to kind of look at this and go, A, you're going to save a bag loads of time if you deal with stuff really early. Actually, it's good to have expectations of people. You know, it's really good to have high expectations of people. That's how you help people stretch their performance. It's how you help them develop. Where I see it go wrong, and I think you've described it in that way as well, it's when I've got frustrated as a manager, and then I snap. Then all the person is seeing is that snap reaction, rather than maybe weeks of frustration, because maybe they've not felt that you've been frustrated about it as a manager. You were expecting by crystal ball gazing for them to understand they weren't doing something right, or not quite, having an impact on X, Y, and Z. And you're like, well, how do they not know how to do their job? Well, do you know what? Sometimes people don't know how to do the job in the way you want it. So that's where those conversations have to happen, isn't it? To have that clarity, that expectation setting. And it might be you get to a point where you go, we've got a disagreement on this. Let's understand that disagreement and understand how we can move forward from it. Because it might be, as a manager, you then need to impose I know you want to do it that way. I need you to do it this way. How do we move that forward? Or, oh, actually, that is probably a better way of doing it. I need to back down and I need to shift my expectations or my understanding of what you're doing. So I think just having those open conversations really helps. So what are your tips for leaders in terms of how they approach those conversations? How do they get on with doing that?
Fundamentally, you've got to know your team. You've got to have looked at how your team's made up. How do these people work? How do they operate? Have a bit of curiosity about basic, how people function. So we all have our natural styles and working styles and traits. And actually, do you know which people prefer that honest, straight up adult conversation? If so, you go in that way. Do other people prefer, they might take things a little bit more to heart? So it would be a case of saying, I really appreciate the hard work that you've put in this area, and to get us to this result. Going forward, we need to do it in a slightly different way for these are the reasons why. How do you feel about that? Are you okay with that? And approach it in a gentler, more supportive way. But it's knowing the people, it's knowing the switches, it's anticipating how they're going to react to things, and approaching those conversations with a bit of genuine curiosity around, like, can you tell me more about why you do this in this way? And rather than jumping straight into a conclusion, as in, I'm sorry that's wrong, you need to stop doing that. It's like, oh, notice this is happening this way. Tell me a little bit about it. And, just have that curiosity and let it be a two-way conversation. It doesn't need to be confrontational. It can be just a genuine, interested conversation, which leads you to a way of making a call on how you do want it. As you said, if a manager can say, do you know what, your way works better than mine, brilliant, that's great. If that can't happen, then that's fine too. And it's just a case of being really clear about what the expectation is about how it should be done, so that person kind of left feeling, all right, I understand, I get it, and that's all that needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you were describing there for me was that building the connection with your team, knowing your team, and them knowing that your intervention around that is coming from a place of care, of support, of building them, not taking them down. So when you go into a scenario to give somebody feedback and you know that relationship isn't in a very good place, that is a lot harder for that to be landed in a really good way. So I think you're right about knowing your team and understanding the things that might trigger them positively and negatively to kind of respond to the questioning, the feedback, the view, the judgment that you've maybe got in that situation. It just makes such a difference, doesn't it? If you're in a place where they know they're coming at it from a positive
Absolutely. Absolutely. I go back to what I said earlier. Very few people go to work with an intention not to do a good job. So these things tend to be miscommunication, misunderstanding, misinterpretation of something. And it just needs to be talked about and done with respect and dignity.
Thoughts then in terms of those so maybe they've started having those initial early conversations about problems or challenges or different views on how things should happen. But as a leader, they may be sensing that this is escalating in some way, or the relationship is getting fractured in some way, or there's something not quite right. What's your recommendations or tips in terms of how the leader should handle that situation?
Good question. I think this is maybe when there's a slight step change. So you've gone in there and had the respectful conversation, but it's not going the way that you'd hoped, and actually it's starting to feel like it might develop further. I think for the manager to remain calm is key. So, take a breath, literally take a breath and keep your cool. Don't get your emotions involved. It happens, it happens. The employee can quite often be upset, angry, as a result of this. So, but you keep your cool as a manager. And I think this is where you do need to start to take control of it as well. Have that conversation again with expectations. Just be really crystal clear about your expectations and follow up in writing. So confirm, you've had that meeting, you've said, you've listened to the view, they're not very happy, but actually, this is the organisation's way of doing something, this is how it needs to be done, or this is how you need them to behave. Maybe a behaviours and values led thing rather than someone not following a process or underperforming, whatever it may be. Be really clear about the expectations that you have and the support that you'll give to help them get there. So follow that up in writing, again, respectfully, this is what we chatted about. I understand you had a difference of opinion. However, I just want to be really clear. This is what we expect going forward. This is the support we discussed, and I'll give you, or I left you with the offer of support, and feel free to come back to me with anything that you feel you might need going forward. From this point forward, this is our expectation. And it's a tough one because we are sort of getting prepared at this stage for the potential that it might go to a formal process, whether that's just the disciplinary process or the performance management process. But starting to put that conversation in writing so that people they know exactly where they stand and what's being discussed, and then they're not left with any grey areas basically around what's been agreed. I think that's really important at this stage. I also think that having a kind of peer network as well can help in these situations without betraying any confidences or breaching any confidentiality, for that leader to have somewhere to be able to have a conversation about that they're having a tough time. That's quite important.
It's quite tough, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
How it feels for you as a leader handling those types of situations. I think before we dive into some of that support aspect, what are your thoughts in terms of how follow-up happens alongside that? So, sometimes I'll see that it's like, I've told you now, that's done, but actually here's the support. But sometimes I'll see that then there's weeks and weeks and weeks that go by and they've not spoken to each other. How important is that once that kind of check-in of, no, this is the formal expectation, that the manager is then actually leaning into that follow-up and that support. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a really good point. So ideally, they're going to, as part of that initial conversation, have said, we'll check in again on this, in 2 weeks' time. You've got, but if you need me before then, please feel free to reach out. But check in and monitor it and make sure that it's going the way that you need it to go. It's going in the right direction. And if it is, give them the praise and the credit for that. Thank you so much for adapting the way that you worked. Or, I've seen a big change. It's been a big positive difference. Thank you very much. It's what we look to see going forward. And, keeping that momentum going. If it's not going the way that it should, again, it's an opportunity to pick that up really early and to say, we're not there. Has there been any progress at all? Has there been any shift? If there hasn't, well, we need to have a slightly different conversation now then. But regular check-ins and monitoring. I mean, if you're doing things like monthly one-to-ones and it coincides with something like that, great. But pop in just a 15-minute check-in every 2 weeks until you're comfortable that they understand and they're able to do what you need them to do. But it won't just go away with one conversation. This is a relationship, and it needs to happen.
Absolutely. And I think that regular check-in point is so important when you're noticing the difference as well, when you're noticing the improvement. Like, get on it immediately. Like as soon as you are noticing the shift, like, brilliant, great, love that. That's what they need to be hearing. And that reinforcement of, it wasn't a critique. Actually, this is about praising performance now, and how do we shift that feeling and understanding? It's so important for them, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And like, it can be, I've seen situations turn around massively, from those. I had one myself when I was managing quite a big team, and I'd inherited some issues from my predecessor. I had a member of staff who had tons of potential, but I just couldn't seem to get through to them about how the direction of travel that we needed to be going on. And I just felt there was a lot of blocking and a lot of deliberate, almost like, well, no, I'm not doing it that way. And I tried lots of different techniques and had the conversation. And one day I just said, I found that meeting really difficult. And they said, really, why? And I was like, because I would really have hoped that you would have supported the position that I was taking. However, this is what you did. And they had a bit of a wake-up call at that point, and was actually, they were a bit mortified because hadn't intended to come across that way. And I think they'd maybe been a little bit oblivious about their own behaviour and unaware of how they were coming across. But we had a really great conversation, and that day was such a landmark day for the change in this person. And this person actually then became probably my most valued member of a big, big, big team. And just got it. It is about sometimes just keeping on, having those conversations, and just until you find the driver that works for that other person as well, and what it is that will actually help them to see. Yeah.
I totally get that. Love it. And I think that's about, very much like you've said, that understanding the individual and being brave enough to kind of go, this is what I'm seeing. Am I seeing that? Or is it just I'm getting the wrong end of the stick? What's going on here? Tell me about that. And that's okay to do that. But it's tough, isn't it? And you've touched on this already a little bit about how tough it is for leaders. And you can feel quite isolated, and you feel quite uncomfortable and vulnerable as a leader when you're stepping into dealing with these types of situations. What's your recommendations for if somebody finds themselves in that situation, what they could do?
I think you're absolutely right. It's an isolating, it's a lonely position, and until people have been in managerial or leadership roles, I'm not sure that they understand that, and they just assume that there's this big club that they're not part of, that all of these leaders are in a club together, and we all know that it doesn't work like that. And I think
it doesn't at all. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, So I think there's a few things that leaders can do to look after themselves, because that's what it's about. It's about looking after yourself and maintaining your own well-being and resilience, because we do need to be resilient as leaders. Having that kind of peer support, however that looks in that organisation, again, without breaching personal information, but just having other people around who are in similar positions where you can talk in general, and get your support. That's hugely underestimated, and I think it's a really helpful thing to have. But also to kind of carve out a bit of time to reflect on these situations, to reflect on, maybe what you've said in that meeting about, we can all improve. As I said, no one's perfect. So how could you improve for next time? How could you maybe handle it differently? And take yourself off to recharge. Do the well-being, the walk. Get outside for a bit. Just take yourself away from a heated conversation or a supercharged atmosphere in the office, if that's where you are, because that can be really tough as well, just to sit in amongst it when there's an atmosphere. So take yourself out of it. Use your HR team. So whether that's kind of your internal or your in-house HR team, or your an external provider, if that's who you use, it doesn't need to become a formal thing. You can start that conversation with, I don't need you to do anything, I just need a safe space to talk, so I can just talk this through. So and that's fine. And I think a lot of managers are scared that if they take something to HR, then it will become formal. No, it doesn't need to. Absolutely. Just be really clear that you just want a confidential ear, and a person that you can talk to, because you're finding it tough too. And I think finally, kind of honour your boundaries in terms of your own work-life balance boundaries and your own emotional boundaries, like what's overstepping the lines. If you do have a situation that's got really difficult, and it can happen when emotions are heightened, and that people can become rude at work and unprofessional. There has to be a line where you're willing to say, no, that you've gone that's too far, that's a step too far. We need to act in accordance with our values.
Stop.
Stop. And don't just take it. Don't be that punching bag. Don't allow someone else to use you as that punching bag, because that's just weakening your own resilience and emotional well-being, and it's not putting you in a good position for you to do your job. So honour those boundaries, be quite strict with them, because it is a tough time, and just give yourself a bit of grace. It's tough, and recognise it's tough, and just allow yourself a bit of time to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, I think that's really, really useful advice for them to kind of not get lost in the situation. What are your thoughts in terms of, because I've seen this a lot with some of the leaders that I coach or have worked with, and sometimes we get into these scenarios and we're talking about them, and for me there's a reality of maybe they actually have never developed the skills to have that type of curious conversation, or kind of some of the other things that they really need as leaders. And I think connecting that reflection point that you talked about, if they're identifying that they're really struggling with key parts of the technical skill they need, like communication, like capturing notes, like whatever that might be, they really do need to take responsibility there to kind of flag the need for help there, don't they?
Absolutely, yeah. None of us are born with skills to become a great manager, and there's no shame in that. Some people are more natural than others, but that doesn't mean to say they're better in longer term. Because if someone's aware of where their shortcomings are in terms of training needs, and they do something about it, that proactive kind of action is far more valuable than somebody who just is born with the ability to have a tough conversation and not be impacted by it. I think there's real I have real admiration for people who recognise in themselves.
It's inspiring, I think.
I need some help in this area, and I'm going to make sure I get that. And there's so many resources available. These days, there is no excuse for us not developing ourselves in any area of our lives. There's so much out there. So yeah, I think you do. I think people do have to be responsible for thinking that's, the prospect of having that conversation in the first place is making me uneasy. So what can I do about it? Speak to your own manager. What resources do you have? Speak to, your HR, your training team about company resources. Go and find something else that's out there on for yourself, and do something about it. 100%. Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. Any other final tips that we've not covered that you wanted to make sure our leaders are aware of?
I think maybe the only thing I probably haven't spoken about is if initially you can create a culture of openness within the team, two-way feedback, which is genuinely appreciated. And that's tough. It is tough to do. I'm not suggesting for a second that that's easy. But if you can lead in a way whereby your team members feel that it's a safe environment to be able to raise any concerns or challenge something in a positive way, then you're already halfway there, because you're going to be just talking about these things in an everyday situation. They're probably never going to get to the point where someone's frustrated, probably yourself. So yeah, I think if from the outset you can really try to drive that culture within your team, that's such a strength, and it will stand you in good stead.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us on the podcast. Where can people find you? Where's the best way for people to get hold of you?
I live on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn at Lisa Thompson at Iona HR, and that's probably the best place to drop me a comment or a message or any questions that you've got.
It's lovely. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights and expertise and knowledge on this episode. I'm really grateful to have you with us. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining this episode of the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast. You'll find all the resources and the links that we mentioned down in the show notes. If you love this episode, why not share it with somebody else in a leadership role who you think would find this useful? If you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And if we've earned it, why not leave us a 5-star review? I'm Anwen, your host, and I look forward to welcoming you back to the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast very soon. Bye for now.